In the previous lecture, we have been talking briefly about the social history of Sanskrit and the origin of Kavya. In this lecture, we are going to answer some of the crucial questions concerning the idea of Shastra and the genesis and evolution of Sanskrit literary theory. Before we delve into this topic, it is necessary to talk about the idea of theory or Shastra. Shastra, or the prescription of acceptable practices in a field of knowledge, was in fact an integral part of almost all knowledge systems in early and medieval India. In early India, it covered a wide range of areas such as ethics and morality, sex, drama, sculpture, astrology, salvation, etc. So we have Dharma Shastra, Kama Shastra, Natya Shastra, Shilpa Shastra, Jyoti Shastra, Moksha Shastra, etc. The term Shastra refers to two things. First, it denotes the discipline which codifies the practices within a field of knowledge. It also signifies a treatise which prescribes the rules of an area of study. So it's simultaneously a system of knowledge that a person would seek to master and a treatise codifying such knowledge. Codifying the positive and negative regulations of some given human practice, Shastra always, in any discipline, played a vital role in preventing any aberration in the praxis of knowledge. As is and should be the case, the theorization of Kavya evolved and gained definite shape only after its writing had been prevalent for some time. Although Kavya originated as early as the beginning of the Common Era and then flourished through the works of creative writers like Ashwaghosha, Bhasa, Kalidasa and so on, there was no attempt to systematize the knowledge about the art of composing Kavya until the 7th century CE. According to the available historical evidence that we have, the earliest available text in the Kavya Shastra tradition is Bhamaha's Kavyalankara in the 7th century CE. The title Kavyalankara literally means the ornament of poetry. Now you may ask, what about Bharata's Natya Shastra? Wasn't it composed earlier than Bhamaha's Kavyalankara? Yes, you are absolutely right. It was composed earlier than Bhamaha's Kavyalankara, there is no doubt about it. But Bharata's Natya Shastra is primarily a treatise on dramaturgy. In Sanskritic cultural history, the term poetics in its broadest sense was concerned with two subject matters, namely Natya and Kavya. The factors that distinguished Natya from Kavya in terms of style, composition and aesthetic effect were so strong that Sanskrit poetics virtually got bifurcated into two streams, such as Natya Shastra and Kavya Shastra. While the Natya Shastra tradition of poetics focused primarily on the performance of drama on stage, Kavya Shastra was exclusively concerned with the ontology of Kavya or literature. Although texts in the Natya Shastra tradition such as Bharata's Natya Shastra exercised a veritable influence upon Kavya Shastra tradition, especially through the understanding of how literature embodies rasa or aesthetic emotion, its chief focus of attention was primarily the structure of drama in performance, not the theory of literature. Although many works in the Natya Shastra tradition contain some very fruitful deliberations on poetic language, Natya Shastra did not pay considerable attention to literary language. A case in point is Bharata's Natya Shastra itself. In Natya Shastra, Bharata's reflections on literary language are very minimal compared to the amount of attention he pays to the structure of drama or dramatic performance on stage. In Natya Shastra, only chapters 15 and 18 deal with poetic language. Although I call Bhamaha's Kavyalankara the first treatise on literary theory, I do not mean to say that prior to Bhamaha there were no discussions at all about Kavya. Bhamaha himself refers to a few literary theoreticians before him, and by using terms such as Anye, Apare, Kechit, etc. He also names a literary theoretician named Methavin. So this means that there used to happen discussions about poetry and poetic language even before Bhamaha. But these deliberations about the art of composing poems might have been conducted orally by poets and lay connoisseurs of art, verbal art, without collating their ideas into a systematic body of knowledge. Bhamaha's Kavyalankara is the first text to take this crucial step towards the systematization and codification of thoughts of the art of composing poems. Bhamaha's influence upon later literary theoreticians, especially upon those from Kashmir writers, was so strong that they often treated him as the founding father of Sanskrit poetics and made him stand for everything that is old school. According to scholars like Egal Bronner, this is a trend that began with the great 9th century scholar Utpada and his extensive commentary on Bhamaha's Kavyalankara. Considering these facts, Bhamaha's Kavyalankara can rightly be called the starting point of the early phase of Sanskrit poetics. Even though Bhamaha's Kavyalankara inaugurated Sanskrit poetics and very much served as a guiding light for the subsequent literary theoreticians, it was Dandin's Kavyadarsha, or the mirror of poetry in the 7th century CE, that became heavily influential for various non-Sanskritic literary traditions in South Asia. Throughout the Sanskrit cosmopolis, this work was actually thoroughly studied and readapted. Siya Bhasha Alankara, or Ornament of Our Own Language, in the 9th century CE in Sinhala, Thandi Alankara, or the literary art of Dandin, in the 10th century CE in Tamil, Sangha Rekshida Subodha Alankara, or literary art without toil, in the 13th century CE in Pali, etc., are a few vernacular treatises on poetics based on Dandin's Kavyadarsha. According to Pollock, all this makes Dandin's Kavyadarsha the most influential work on literary science in world history after Aristotle's Poetics. Now let's take a look at the way in which Sanskrit Kavya Shastra conceptualized the form of Kavya or literature. Sanskrit always held an ontological view about literature. That is to say, it believed that it is the presence of certain special linguistic features such as poetic suggestion, figures of speech, figurative deviation, etc., that attribute literariness to a work of art. So, Kavya Shastra considered Kavya as a specialized mode of language marked by the ingenious use of certain special linguistic devices. It also delimited Kavya from other uses of language such as Shastra, the Vedas, and workday language. We have a host of literary theoreticians in Sanskrit poetics who typify this exclusionist view of literature. Abhinavagupta, in his commentary on Anandavardhana's Dhvanyaloka, very clearly distinguishes the remit of Kavya from that of the Veda and workday language. He opines, both everyday sentences and Vedic sentences have meaning without being poems. Hemachandra in Kavyanushatana says that it is the presence of 4 components such as Shabda or sound, Artha or meaning, Guna or poetic qualities, and Alankara or figures of speech that make a piece of writing Kavya. Vakpada too delimited the ambit of Kavya by defining it as a combination of Shabda and Artha, marked by the presence of Gunas and Alankaras. According to Bhoja, Although poetry is generally called the combination of word and meaning, not all combinations of word and meaning can turn out to be or can claim the status of a kavya. In Sringara Prakasha, Bhoja distinguishes between kavya and other linguistic genres on the basis of the nature of language employed in them. According to Bhoja, while workday language is the explicit language of science and daily life, kavya is the deviant language found in texts teeming with aesthetic pleasure. In his famous Sringara Prakasha, Bhoja even lists 12 rules governing the combination of signifier or shabda and signification or artha in the production of poetic language. Of these 12 principles, while the first 8 ones are common to many other forms of language, the last 4 ones are unique to the linguistic body of kavya. These 4 characteristics that Bhoja exclusively reserves for kavya include the presence of poetic qualities or guna, figures of speech or alankara, aesthetic emotion or rasa, and the absence of poetic faults or doshas. In Saraswati Kanthaparana, Bhoja illustrates the process in which a nondescript expression is made poetic and laden with rasa through the figurative deviation of speech. Bhoja says, in the expression, "Hey maiden, why don't you love me who love you a lot?" we have only an ordinary expression that produces only boredom because it lacks rasa or aesthetic emotion. Whereas in the expression, "the God of love, that cruel person shows no mercy to me, but he holds no grudge to you, my pretty-eyed lass," the sense is sophisticated and generates rasa. The factors that are instrumental for the creation of rasa are these: a novel idea, non-ordinary mellifluous expression, beautiful composition, clarity in articulation, and meaning that conforms to propriety. Critics like Jayadeva, Vidyanatha, Bhattanayaka, Kundaga, etc. also take similar attitude towards literature. I will include their definitions of kavya at the end of this lecture as an appendix for your reference. We can see this exclusionist view of kavya as a special linguistic category with complex literary conventions and elaborate metrical schemes unchangingly going down the line till the end of the active phase of Sanskrit poetics or the Sanskrit literary culture, with Jagannatha in the 17th century observing that Ramaniyartha Pradibhataka Shabdam Kavyam. It means kavya is signifiers generating noble significations. One can confidently say that literary theoreticians in Sanskrit, irrespective of their spatio-temporal locations, unanimously agreed upon the fact that kavya was a special mode of language or special mode of expression, distinctly different from the ordinary form of speech. If kavya is a special form of expression, what are the special components, special features which make kavya a unique entity? In response to this enquiry into the factors responsible for literariness, Sanskrit literary theoreticians came up with different formal elements such as Alankara, Riti, Guna, Dhvani, Vakrokti, Auchitya, etc. as the formal factors responsible for the creation of the unique status of kavya. The only point of contention among the practitioners of Sanskrit literary theory, who generally agreed upon the unique nature of kavya, was the prioritization of these formal elements as the soul or atma of literature. Is it possible for kavya to have a soul? I know you must be wondering now. Comparing kavya to a human body was a common practice in Sanskrit literary science. Literary theoreticians often call the body of kavya Kavya Sharira. Kavya Sharira means the body of kavya. Kavya is compared to a human body. The image of Kavya Sharira in fact keeps on appearing in Kavya Shastra. For instance, Anandavardhana opines that if poetry has a body, then it has to have a soul. For Ananda, Dhvani is the soul of poetry. Shabda and Artha are the body parts. Alankaras function like the ornaments such as bangles, etc. And gunas or poetic merits are compared to the qualities of human soul like courage. Kshemendra compares a Kavya Sharira that does not conform to the notions of propriety or aujitya to a man who has found his ornaments in wrong places. Different literary theoreticians privileged different formal elements as the inalienable mark or the soul of literature. For Vamana, Riti was the soul of Kavya. For Anandavardhana, it was Dhvani. Kuddaka considered Vakrokti as the soul of Kavya. So scholars like Kshemendra held Aujitya in high esteem. Samudrabantha, a 10th century commentator on Riyaka's Alankara Sarvasva, gives us a glimpse into this. In his commentary on Alankara Sarvasva, Samudrabantha observes, literature is marked by certain special words and meaning. The speciality of these two, that is Shabda and Artha, can be analyzed in three ways: through some language feature or dharma, or through some function or vyapara, or through aesthetic suggestion or dhvani. The first group contains two sects, the one that gives importance to figures of speech or alankara, and the one that lays emphasis on poetic qualities or guna. In the second sect, some pay attention to beautiful expression and others to the capacity to produce aesthetic pleasure in the readers. Of these five groups, the first one is accepted by Utpada and others, the second one is accepted by Vamana, the third one is by the author of Vakrokti Jivita, the fourth by Bhattanayaka, and the fifth by Anandavardhana. This very clearly shows that although there were differences of opinion among literary theoreticians as to which of these elements has to be treated as the most important element of Kavya, they all had a consensus of opinion on the idea that Kavya is a unique use of language. But what is the most important aspect? Therefore, efforts were made to understand various formal elements that attribute an aura of uniqueness to literature. The term Alankara Shastra, which was often used synonymously with Sanskrit poetics, readily functions as a pointer to the teleology of Sanskrit Kavya Shastra. Because of Kavya Shastra's unwavering interest in the ornaments or Alankara of Kavya that made literature a higher order linguistic composition, the term Alankara Shastra was often used synonymously with Kavya Shastra. The word Alankara should not be used in the narrow sense of figures of speech here. In the expression Alankara Shastra, the word Alankara refers to all aspects, including the figures of speech which ornate a piece of writing to make it literary.